Tonight, a prince finds his princess, a fairy tale with a very familiar ring. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, guilty. Congressman Charles Rangel awaits his punishment after a House panel convicts him of 11 ethics violations. Battling cancer. Researchers say how patients die may have a lot to do with where they live.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. The wedding announcements are usually reserved for the society pages, but when the couple may just be the future King and Queen of England, well, that's page one news around the world. Prince William, second in line to the British throne, and Kate Middleton, both 28 years old, announced their engagement today. In a world filled with troubles, the headlines gave the Brits and others reason to celebrate. Mark Phillips in London now on another wedding of the century.
She had been called Weighty Katie, but Kate Middleton, Catherine Elizabeth Middleton now, according to the palace announcement, is waiting no more. Finally, a marriage that had been wildly rumored for years is official. An engagement sealed with the same sapphire and diamond ring William's father had given his mother. His way, William said, of bringing Princess Diana close to this joyous event.
It was my way of making sure that my mother didn't miss out on today.
William had popped the question 3 weeks ago on a romantic vacation in Kenya, prompting the question today for a couple who'd been together for at least 8 years, why the wait?
I'm trying to learn from lessons done in the past, and I just wanted to give her the best chance to settle in and see what happens the other side.
And I'm also glad that I've had the time to to grow and understand myself more as well. So hopefully,
does that mean I've done well?
Hopefully, do a good job. Yes.
William's father took a pragmatic view of a relationship that's been going on so long.
Obviously thrilled, thank you very much. Practicing for long enough.
William and Kate had been an item, with one brief split-up, since they shared an apartment with others at college at St. Andrews in Scotland. She had caught his eye, it said, at a student charity fashion show. He'd bought a front-row seat.
You know, they are just a normal couple who are in extraordinary circumstances.
As William went through his military training, Kate Middleton was his special guest as he graduated. But the chattering classes were not always Kate's biggest fans. She wasn't royal. She wasn't even aristocratic. Her parents were in the toy business. Her mother had even been a flight attendant. What Kate had was staying power and the prince's eye. In marrying a woman he's known for a long time, who's his own age, and who has already been subjected to the media spotlight, William is avoiding some of the pitfalls that helped to doom his father's first marriage. But comparisons between Diana and Kate are inevitable. The camera loved Diana. It likes Kate too. Diana loved fashion. So does Kate. Diana was hounded by the paparazzi. Kate's had her share of that as well. In the chess game of royal succession, this modern marriage settles a future that looked shaky not too long ago. Behind the Queen and Prince Philip stand Charles and Camilla. And next in line behind them will be William and Kate. If the function of the royals is to provide continuity, the pieces are now all in place. They've had a tough enough time carrying on their relationship in the past, and as they showed at the end of their interview, they seem to know there are tough times ahead, too.
Well done.
I'm not very good at that.
And so the big will they, won't they question has now been answered, but the little questions, when exactly next spring or summer this wedding will take place, that's still a royal secret, and this couple can keep a secret. Katie.
And we'll be waiting with bated breath. Mark Phillips in London. Mark, thank you so much. To Washington now, and a humiliating defeat for the once powerful chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. After a brief trial by an ethics panel, New York Democrat Charles Rangel was convicted of violating House rules. Congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill tonight. And Nancy, Congressman Rangel was found guilty. So what happens now?
Well, Katie, he waits to hear what his punishment will be, most likely a public denouncement, but he's still defiant, saying late today that he feels like he was railroaded.
Never in my wildest dream did any lawyer ever conceive that a hearing would be a package of allegations without witnesses.
It took less than a day for 8 of Rangel's peers to find him guilty of all but one of the charges, including improper solicitation of donations and improper use of rent-controlled apartments.
Count 10, conviction by clear and convincing evidence.
House Democrats didn't have time to dwell on the developments. For the first time since their ranks were decimated in the midterm elections, they gathered to discuss the loss.
You don't always win, but you don't abandon your principles.
2 members in the meeting asked Nancy Pelosi to step aside as leader. She refused, but conservative Blue Dog Democrat Heath Shuler of North Carolina is running against her anyway, insisting it's time for a change.
Look, I can add and subtract pretty well, and realize that it's not a battle that can be won unless the caucus realizes that we do have to go in a different direction.
Pelosi will win because she's convinced enough Democrats that she's the right one to lead the party back to power. After all, she says she's already done it back in 2006. Katie?
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you, Nancy. Meanwhile, a big issue for the new Congress is what to do about the foreclosure crisis. In the first 10 months of this year, more than 900,000 homes were repossessed, about as many as all of 2009. And even one lost home can have a dramatic impact on a neighborhood, as Kelly Kobayea reports.
Like most 2-year-olds, Isaac Dieudonné was full of life. Last October, as his family was moving into their newly renovated home in Miramar, Florida, Isaac wandered off and fell into a neighbor's dirty, algae-filled swimming pool.
They started doing CPR to see if they can save him, but he didn't make it.
The empty home looked fine from the front, but in the back,
the fence is broken.
The family lawyer says it was full of code violations and safety hazards. It is one of nearly 1 million bank-owned homes across the country sitting empty and often falling apart. Neglected properties like this one are becoming such a problem, creating safety hazards, dragging down property values, that some local governments are beginning to crack down, imposing much stiffer penalties on banks and investors. In Columbus, Ohio, property owners face a $1,000 fine and 6 months in jail for not maintaining a home. In some Georgia and California cities, fines on banks can reach $100,000 a year per home. In Los Angeles, neighbors are joining the fight by reporting rundown homes to a website. They've pinpointed 40,000 so far.
We've seen rats and we've seen raccoons and we've seen all kinds of other critters move in.
Some cities are tapping into a $6 billion federal program to buy back neglected homes and either fix them up or bulldoze them. But it's not always easy, like this case in Ohio.
The court wouldn't let the bank complete the foreclosure until the bank notified the borrower that they were finishing the foreclosure, and the bank couldn't notify the borrower because he'd vacated the property.
I missed him so much today.
The pool where Isaac died is covered 1 year later, but still full of water and the gate unlocked. The property has changed hands so many times, the family's lawyer named 20 banks and businesses in a lawsuit, hoping someone will be forced to take responsibility. Kelly Kobayea, CBS News, Miramar, Florida.
And still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, the battle for equal pay and the brave women who paved the way, a story made for Hollywood. But up next, end-of-life care, why the quality of care terminal cancer patients get may depend on where they live. They are the words no one wants to hear. You have cancer and there's no cure. About 500,000 Americans die of this disease every year. Most prefer to spend their final days at home. But a major report out today says about a third die in the hospital, often receiving painful and expensive treatments they may not even want. More now from Dr. John LaPook.
I'm sad, deeply saddened. But it is what it is.
58-year-old photographer Vincent Giordano is used to looking at life through a clear lens. Now, as he confronts advanced esophageal cancer, seeing things clearly is more important to him than ever.
What do you think the different possible pathways are?
It's over for me very, very soon.
Giordano has decided to stop chemotherapy. Instead, Memorial Sloan Kettering is giving him palliative care,
So I think a lot of education is required in it.
Which means relieving symptoms like nausea and pain. It's not about trying for a cure or resorting to feeding or breathing tubes. The hope is to enable him to go home.
Hope's got many dimensions to it. It isn't all just about living longer.
Studies show that most patients don't want to spend their last days in a hospital. Dartmouth researchers analyzed how well this wish is fulfilled around the country. They found the quality of end-of-life care varies widely. In Mason City, Iowa, just 7% of patients died in the hospital compared to almost 50% in Manhattan.
The care they receive is much more dependent upon where they receive their care than the care that they want.
Within Manhattan, there were large differences among hospitals. At Memorial Sloan Kettering, 34% of cancer patients died in the hospital. At Lenox Hill, that figure was nearly 50%.
Many patients are dying away from their families, in unfamiliar settings, with a lot of discomfort and pain, and that's a tragedy.
Another measure, aggressive treatment at the end of life, when the chance for a cure is remote. At Sloan Kettering, just 4% of patients received chemotherapy in their last 2 weeks. At Lenox Hill, that figure was over 12%. Lenox Hill told CBS it's reevaluating the balance of burden and benefit of the use of aggressive technology with cancer patients, and that it has recruited physicians specializing in palliative care.
We'll be getting into bed soon.
From the beginning, Giordano's doctors have been honest with him about his odds, and that's prepared him for this moment.
I have to be a grown-up about it and say, this is where I'm at. This is where my wife and I, our lives have taken us right here. Today.
Helping patients find their way at the end of life is one of the toughest and most important jobs a doctor has. Katie?
Mr. Giordano was very brave to participate in this piece.
Yes, he was.
But it's a complex issue, John. But if most patients want to die at home, why are so many dying in hospitals?
Katie, I think that one of the big reasons is that doctors wait too long to start the conversation. And I understand, as a doctor, I don't want to take away hope, but I don't want to give false hope. The patients and their families bring their own very complicated set of emotions to the table, okay? So clearly this is one of the very last taboos, but we've just got to get past it because it's very clear that patients do better when this discussion is held sooner rather than later.
All right. Dr. John LaPook. John, thanks so much. And if you or a loved one is battling end-stage cancer and you'd like to learn more, go to our partner in health news, webmd.com, and search Cancer Hospice Care. And when we come back, a soldier receives the military's highest honor, but says he'd trade it in a second if. After being out of the spotlight for nearly 2 years, George W. Bush seems to be everywhere, selling his memoir and today breaking ground for his presidential library. Joining him at Southern Methodist University in Dallas were Mrs. Bush and members of his administration, including former Vice President Dick Cheney, walking with a cane and looking much thinner following heart surgery. At the White House today, President Obama awarded the Medal of Honor to 25-year-old Army Staff Sergeant Sal Giunta. He is the first living recipient of the military's highest medal for valor since the Vietnam War. 3 years ago in Afghanistan, Giunta ran twice through a wall of bullets to rescue 2 fellow soldiers caught in an enemy ambush. One later died. A medic was also killed in the attack.
This is an incredible time, but it's also kind of a bittersweet time. Times like this, because of this day, I lost 2 dear friends of mine, Specialist Hugo Mendoza and Sergeant Joshua Brennan. And although this is so positive, I would give this back in a second to have my friends with me right now.
The president said Sergeant Giunta is as humble as he is heroic. He'll be honored next week in his home state of Iowa. And coming up next, getting paid less than a man for the exact same job? These women had a better idea. And finally tonight, women make up about half the workforce in this country, but on average earn only 81 cents for every dollar a man makes. Tomorrow, the Senate will vote on the Paycheck Fairness Act, a bill that would make it easier for women to sue employers who pay them less based on their gender. But once upon a time, a group of fearless women in Britain paved the way for equal pay, and their story has gone from the factory floor to the silver screen.
This is a man's world.
it may have been a man's world in 1968, but it wouldn't be for long.
The time has come for all women to say enough. We will not accept this any longer.
Made in Dagenham is the true story of a group of working-class English women who walked off the job, protesting their wages at the Ford Motor Factory.
This is about one thing, equal pay or nothing. Everybody, out!
The thing is, we had to do it. I mean, how can you work with men doing the same job and getting different money? It's not right, is it?
78-year-old Gwen Davis and 80-year-old Vera Syme were walking the red carpet this past weekend here in New York. But as two of the real women behind the historic strike, they remember walking picket lines after Ford downgraded their job, sewing seat covers for over 2,000 cars a day, calling them unskilled laborers.
So no car seat covers for Fords?
No, not from us anyway.
They downgraded your skill level so they didn't have to pay you as much.
At the time, all we wanted was a higher grade. We didn't want to be classed the same as janitors anymore, because that's what we were classed as, the same grade as janitors. And I mean, that wasn't fair when we were actually producing something and a janitor was just sweeping up.
The 3-week strike didn't just stop production at the largest Ford factory in Europe. On at least one occasion, the divas of Dagenham also stopped traffic. You were there when there was a bit of a snafu with one of the signs during a protest. What happened?
We had these placards. What it said was, we want sex, equality. But what it read was, we want sex.
I know the feeling.
The cars and the lorries, we didn't know what was that. They was hooting. And I thought, oh, they're sticking up for us, we all thought.
This is unbelievable.
But no, they weren't hooting them because they said, we want sex.
They said, see you later, didn't they?
See you later.
Their provocative action finally caught the attention of Employment Minister Barbara Castle, played in the film by Miranda Richardson.
Their cause already has credence. It is equal pay.
The feminist firebrand eventually got Ford to pay them 92% of the men's wages. And 2 years later, she pushed the Equal Pay Act through Parliament. You may have gotten the same salary in 2 years' time, but it took 16 years for Ford to acknowledge that you were a skilled worker.
That's right, yes, another 16 years.
And that was the real victory?
That was our victory, yes. That was what we were fighting for all the while, wasn't it?
And while the world had almost forgotten these so-called Revlon revolutionaries, Vera and Gwen say only now do they understand what an achievement it was to go from making car seats to making history.
I'm asking you to strike now for all women.
What do you hope women and men can learn from what you all did and seeing it portrayed in a movie?
Yes, well, they must stand up for themselves and fight.
Women must, and men must stand with them. I always said a man and a woman are equal if you're doing the same job.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. Good night.